Nich Pachwai, Eninaimo, Wanakshash Chaikwach. Chaikwach is my name. My English name is JoDe Goudy. And as a relative who had expressed, I'm from the Yakima Nation. But more specifically, I guess you can say, identify as Tanan, the people of the land, Natitite, as our people would identify themselves. And Awanachi Nakpanishat with Kukwinakanak Paniwanch Tamanwit. Chi Tamanwit Diwa Patoki Namiao Twanatash. Chow Namiao Naknoitash. Mishnaquit quit Kiatwanata Kuinaknoyaita Namiachai quit. Kanamtan quit Kinakmanita Ilwit. There's been a lot of expressions today. And I'll do my best to try to contribute in a way that hopefully doesn't repeat much, but does its best to have a contribution to all the beauty of the representations of the wills that have come forth from the various lands and areas that have been represented. I want to share a story, and the story is a representation from my Tilla, my grandfather, as was expressed by other speakers today. We have our ways of life that have their histories, and this is a tale of the time where the animal people had lived, and it was a gathering amongst the animal people. There was a discussion that was happening, and there was a question. And the question amongst the animal people at that time was, who's going to be boss? Who's going to be boss? And in this discussion, as the animal people, they gathered around. They were near the water, and they had a fire. They gathered around that fire. And the first to step forth with the representation was Khalish, the wolf. The wolf stepped forward to the other animal relatives that were there. He says, I believe I should be the leader. You all know me. You all understand how I carry myself. I have the ability, I have good eyesight. I can see and smell my nose. You all see the manner in which we, the wolves, we work together. We're not as individuals, we go in packs. The very sustainment of our existence relies upon the ability to work as a team. These are the kind of characteristics and also the medicine which I carry. You're all aware of this. This is why I should be the one that's designated and selected to become the leader, the boss. The animal people, they listened. And so Khalish, the wolf, he stepped back. Behind him, the Anahoy, the Pine Tla, the bear come forth and said, you have all listened to our relative, the wolf. And indeed, what he has expressed, it's true. But you all know that I, the bear, I carry the strongest medicine amongst the animal people. This is well known amongst everyone. I'm big, I'm strong. There's certain things that I do that no one else can carry on and do. And for all these reasons, I should be the one that's selected as the leader. I should be the one that is carried on and acknowledged to be the leader of the animal people. And as this representation was coming forth from Bear, there was a splashing, a little bit of movement in the water that they were all gathered near there. And from the water, come walking out, Waikanish, Mrs. Salmon. Mrs. Salmon, she walked from the water to where they gathered. And she said, who are you all to think and believe that you should be the boss? Who are you all to think and believe that you should be the leader? I, Waikanish, Mrs. Salmon, I carry skills and things and laws that none of you can do. None of you. All the while, Nami Anathla, Tamanawatla, our Creator, is watching this. Mrs. Salmon carries on. You see where I come. As I walked from the water. I carry the ability to be in that water. I can breathe, I can swim. I can do all these things within the water. And I come out and I walk amongst you on this ground. Who amongst all you animal relatives can do this? This is the question she's posing to all the animal people that are there gathered. Nami Anatla Tamanwatla, our creator, took exception to the way and the manner that Mrs. Salmon Waikanish was expressing herself in a boastful way about how she should be boss. And at that time, Tamanwatla, our creator, Nami Anatla, gathered Waikanish, Mrs. Salmon, brought Mrs. Salmon before our creator. What is it, this will that you're bringing forth? Why is it that you express yourself in such a way? I'm going to punish you. I will punish you for the manner in which you're conducting yourself. And so the Creator put down the laws on behalf of Waikanish at that time that we know and understand today. Said, no longer will you be able to walk on the ground. To the water you will go, and that's where you will stay. This is one of the forms of your punishment. There will be a long journey that is part of your life. You will go from the place that you are born, and you will travel down through the streams, to the rivers, to the ocean. There you will remain at a time, and then coming in full circle, your journey will end at the place that you were born. This is part of your punishment. Another form of your punishment is this. You will never be able to observe one of your children being born. And so as Mrs. Salmon makes that journey, she comes from that egg. She goes as a young, all the way down, journeys, makes that journey to the ocean, spends the time there. And at the completion of her life cycle, that journey is made all the way up to that same place where she was brought out, born from that egg. And then she's completing that cycle as she lays her eggs into that spawning bed. And as she lays the eggs into that spawning bed, what do we see Mrs. Salmon do? She turns on her side. Why? She's trying to watch to see if she can see one of her babies be born. And as she is watching, what is her gills doing? They fight. Fighting for that air that she breathed as she walked on this ground. This is the punishment that Waikanish, in our language, Salmon, Mrs. Salmon had received on behalf of her expression that she had brought forth with the question with regard to who was going to be boss. And this is what had happened as a representation to the lessons of the same question for each and every one of us. My elder and other elders, they expressed many stories like this to all of us, those of us who perhaps listen, and I can admit that there's times where I didn't listen quite as well as I should have. Probably all of us go through that. But I do my best to carry the representations of some of these expressions into my life going forward. Because these tales and these expressions, today's gathering, the representations that have come forth and all the wills that have been expressed, they all surround, in my view, 6 questions. Those questions, number 1 is Shinamwanisha. Who are you? Manaknek namwa. Where do you come from? Tuyanum shnawa. Where are you going? Where do you wish to go? These are 3 questions that were brought forth by my elders, my ancestors. They pounded those questions into my heart and what I thought was my head when I was younger, but more importantly, into my heart. And since that time, I've brought forth 3 additional questions that help me in my understanding of trying to better relate as to how my individual awareness interacts with that of the collective awareness. And the 4th question is, what is? The 5th question is, what isn't? And the sixth question is why? To me, we are consciously or unconsciously answering these questions consistently with every decision that we make in our day-to-day lives, whether they be second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, however it may be. Big decisions, small decisions, the foundation of how we react and make those decisions comes from the answers to these six questions. These are questions of identity. Everything has identity. So as we have heard the representations of the respective ways of life that are represented, those have an association and a relationship that is essential to have that interaction with the Waikanish, with the salmon. You're talking about a salmon people gathering. This is a representation of an understanding that you're hearing from those of us who still carry on in our ways of life, that if salmon is not part of our way of life, we cease to be. It's as simple as that. And I truly wish to echo the representations of my other brothers and elders who are able to speak before me in honoring our life givers. All the women who led the way in today's expressions and continue to express themselves throughout. It's truly a beautiful representation to understand what it is to have the power of giving life. And as I listened to some of them expressions today, I kind of envisioned my great-grandmothers, my grandmothers, my mother, my wife, my daughter. And I envisioned them standing up. And as I tried to understand in today's representation of what is and what isn't and why, I envisioned the blood that flows through their body as they stood up. I envisioned their arteries, the blood vessels, and everything that makes up, as sometimes we see in the medical diagrams, of how blood flows. And I was trying to envision the flow of life through my great-grandmothers, through my grandmothers, my mother, my wife, my daughter, and all the others that I know that are representations of life. And I tried to come to an understanding of the representation of what it was that if I seen all my relatives, those life givers that I love so much, and I start trying to impose different restrictions upon their arteries, if I put blockades or things that block the way that their blood flows through their body, and if you did that throughout, what would that do to the flow of life through them and their ability to continue to share life? And so in that expression, I was trying to just listen to the beautiful life givers today. And I had that, representation of the way that it follows that of the representation of Tichum, our Mother Earth. And so the other expression that I kind of want to share about some of the followings of our way of life. Chushiwa wak ishwit. Water is indeed life. We heard a representation from another elder speaker earlier. So this is about water. And in many ways, yes, it is. And the representation of a natural cycle. To share a small portion of how that natural cycle is from teachings of my ancestors, my elders. You have that of Walla Walla. And behind Walla Walla, it flows to Chush Pine. From Chush Pine, it goes to Wanapine. From Wanapine, it goes to Utta Chush Pine. From Utta Chush Pine, it goes to Tooth. This is the representation of the natural cycle of water that we can observe. You see, because Walla Walla is the spring as it flows out of the earth. The representations of Walla Walla as that water comes forth, clean, filtered throughout the natural process of cleansing that happens to water as it goes through this cycle. And as that spring comes out, it's pure. The water is pure. You think about the different type of vegetation and insects and animals who interact with that spring. There's a lot that we that attempt to follow our natural ways of life can utilize in understanding those ones who interact with that of the Walla Walla. From Walla Walla, it flows to Chush Pine. As that spring comes out of the ground and it flows down, eventually it goes to a creek, for those of you that say it that way. That's what Chush Pine is. And as that creek, as it flows, and you think about the creeks that you know, maybe have swam in and those kind of things, in the same representation of how that creek is, you see how the water flows. You see the impediments that come before a creek as the trees fall. You see the animals that are there, the beaver, perhaps, the ducks, the trout, the pennywinkles, all the different things that are interacting in that creek. They're a representation of Chush Pine. Chush Pine, it will continue to flow, and it'll meet up with Wanapine. Wanapine is a big river. Our ancestors, much as the relatives before me, we come from Enchiwana, the big river. Everybody else knows and understands to be the Columbia River. But that big river, you see how it flows. It's not the Walla Walla, nor is it the Chush Pine. As that big river flows, there isn't much that can stop it, not even dams. They'll be able to hold it back a little bit. But you think about the way that that river is as you observe it. You think about the animals and the fish that interact with that river. You think about the different things that become affected by how that river flows. And then you think about where it flows to. All these big rivers that have this representation. They flow to Atta Chush Pine. That's what we know and understand to be the ocean. Atta Chush Pine, the beauty of the ocean. And it's that ocean, as we once again think about all the representation of life that are within the ocean, all the relatives that express themselves, all the fish, all the animals, all the things that carry on, all the vegetation, all the different things that rely, the winged, everything that is the representation to Atta Chush Pine. And there's something that happens in the realm of cleansing with regard to the salt that is within the Atta Chush Pine. And Atta Chush Pine, it carries itself teaching, a representation of that cycle. Because mainly from Atta Chush Pine, but also other bodies of water, but mainly from our ocean, the beauty of Tulth comes to be. From that big ocean, the water is lifted to the sky. We see that water gather in the sky, and when we look into the clouds, they gather up all this water. And in the representation as to the cycle of life that is represented in the cycle of water, the renewal of life, as those clouds and as that water is gathered from Atta Chush Pine, they come where? To teach to the ground. The ground is showered down and fed by that clean water. That's Tulth, rain. There's much that can be learned from all of us, but for those of us and whose peoples historically had received original instruction, it wasn't instruction where we just said, hey, we're going to go ahead and carry on our way of life, and we're going to make it this way, and we'll make it that way, and because we say and we think so. The representations of at least most, if not all, the people that I know within our territories received original instruction that was, in a sense, what others may identify as divine intervention. Communication that gave instruction of how we are to conduct ourselves as we walk on this ground. And this is the expression that I shared at the beginning. My same elders, but my greatest teacher, he consistently pounded into my heart. Chi tamanwatiwa patoki na miao twanatash. This way of life was set down for us to follow. Chow na miao naknuitash. Not to take care of. Chow na miao naknuitash. Not to take care of. Mishna kwit ki atwanata kui naknuyaita na miachaichwit. And if we follow this way of life correctly, it is our ways of life that turn around to become the caretakers of the Tanan, or the Natitai, the native people of this land. And this is the air of today's time. So within the representation of those type of guidance, I guess you can say, in the form of expressions and story, followings, I wish to share with the collective wills that have come forth in a representation to that of responsible decision-making, the kind of decision-making that's going to sustain our collective existence. Each of us within the exercise of the same 6 questions: who am I, where do I come from, where am I going, what is, what isn't, and why? All of those questions for each and everyone involved with regard to the questions of sustained existence at hand are going to have to come to identifying, what do I stand for? What do I wish to stand for? Where am I going with this? Why am I going about it this way? And so the representations that are brought forth in that, you have all kinds of people who are involved. As was expressed by our brothers and sisters, you have fishermen, you have cooks, you have ceremonial leaders, you have people who carry on all the different duties with regard to the expressions of our collective ways of life. You also have what people may identify as political leaders, environmental organizations, state representation, federal representation, formal elected leadership of native nations. Regardless of who you are in this collective picture of what isn't, what is, and why, all right, I just wish to express to everybody that's got their eyes and ears and hearts open to the question of sustained existence. We got them right where we want them. We got them right where we want them. That of the negative spirit that is attacking the sustained existence of our collective peoples and ways of life. We got them right where we want them. The only thing that will solidify what we identify or can identify as defeat is a lack of expression of integrity from all of us involved. That's the only thing that can secure what we may think, know, and or understand as defeat with regard to the questions and the tasks at hand. So you're in control of your individual and collective destinies as long as we're able to maintain integrity. Because integrity in answering of those 6 questions will lead you to the kind of decisions that we all collectively will identify as responsible. That decisions that will reflect a sustained existence for as long as we can see and identify into the future. I want to tell each and every one that's here today and all you that are viewing out there, Tawi Shamash, I love you. You may not have a choice, but I'm still going to love you. You may not like me, I'm still going to love you. And each and every one that's involved within your respective roles, don't take exception if some of us are going to view the judgment that you are incurring upon the collective of those of us who are advocating for responsible decision-making for sustained existence for as long as we can see into the future. Don't take exception if we are defending the judgment that you are attempting to impose upon us. We are not judging you voluntarily or taking a will or initiative to do so. But if your judgment, based upon the actions that you are advocating and the words that you are expressing, reflects that of irresponsible decision, we are identifying how that judgment that has been imposed upon our collective peoples and ways of life is impacting not only us currently, but the continued sustained existence of our peoples and our ways of life, including the absolute necessity of Waikanish, salmon, to be a part of that. And if we view that, those of us who have that warrior spirit to stand for the goodness of life, the good things of life, we will be tasked to defend ourselves, our peoples, our continued and sustained existence to the best of our ability. And we'll have to see it all plays out. So with that, I apologize if my words have been a little long. I wanted to try to contribute as best as I can, and even though I just am a man today, those of you who know me, there's times you put a mic in front of me, it's tough to get me to be quiet. But I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to express myself along and sharing with all the other beautiful relatives who have had their representations and their expressions come forth today. It truly is an honor. I want to thank Darrell Hilaire, Children of the Setting Sun, for this opportunity of this gathering to happen. Everybody who's had a part in fulfilling some kind of task that has made it happen, not only of the work up to this point, everyone who's been involved into the future and all the work that's still to come. So with that, I want to tell you once again, Tawi Shamash and Klaukush.